Hi, we're out on the range today, so bear with any gunfire you hear in the background. Now, recently I did a review of a Taurus Judge revolver, and some people got kind of bent out of shape because I didn't shoot 45 Colt ammo out of it. I just concentrated on the 410 shells. Well, the reason I did that is because if you load this revolver with 45 Colt ammo, basically what you've got is an oversized 5-shot revolver. It's this firearm's ability to shoot that 410 buckshot and that 410 birdshot that really sets it apart. So that's what I wanted to concentrate on. But either way, today we'll shoot some 45 Colt ammo. Now, the first thing I want to say is people keep telling me as a defense of the Judge platform that 45 Colt is just as powerful as 45 ACP. And when you say something's just as powerful, yeah, you got to make that motion. There's a story behind that. Well, we'll see if we can put that to the test, but comparing these two rounds is very difficult because 45 Colt is almost always a revolver and 45 ACP is almost always an autoloader. If you had a Smith & Wesson Governor, it will shoot both, but whatever results you got out of testing that still wouldn't mean a lot because what results you get out of your Smith & Wesson Governor are not necessarily going to be the same as what I get out of my 1911. So what you get out of your 45 ACP might not be what I get when I use mine. So it's a very difficult test to make and get numbers that are really meaningful. But when you try to do a what is more powerful comparison, you've got to account for as many extraneous variables as you can. And in this case, because shooting the same type of gun would be difficult and might not mean a lot, I'm going to shoot these rounds out of the platforms that they are most commonly used in. Let me show you what I mean. For a 45 Colt, we'll use this Ruger Vaquero. Now this one has a 5.5-inch barrel. And this is a very common platform to shoot 45 Colt. And for our 45 ACP, we'll just use a government model 1911. The ammo we're going to use is this Winchester PDX-1 Defender ammunition. For a 45 ACP, it's a 230 grain bullet, and for a 45 Colt, it's a 225 grain bullet. 5 grains difference, we can live with that. And it's the same brand, same manufacturer, so this should be about as fair a comparison as we can get. Then we'll see if we can translate that into our Taurus Judge and see if it tells us anything. So let's test the velocity of this Winchester 45 ACP amp. .913. .867. .882. .899. Now let's compare that to our 45 Colt. .807. .832. .850. .821. So how'd we do? Well, a 45 Colt out of our Vaquero gave us an average of 827. Let's round that off to 825. And a 45 ACP out of our 1911 gave us an average of 890. So that's 65 feet per second more, which doesn't really sound like much, but in guns that are giving you 800 or 900 feet a second, 65 feet per second more is significant. However, what that really tells us is that depending on what kind of 45 Colt gun and ammo you use compared to what kind of 45 ACP gun and ammo, there probably is some overlap. But keeping the test as fair as I could, using the same types of ammunition in your most typical guns, yeah, 45 ACP is more powerful than a 45 Colt. Also, did you notice that there wasn't really good consistency in those velocities? That tells you something about hyper ammunition maybe not living up to the hype. But the real point is, how is that going to compare out of our Taurus Judge? Now remember, it's only got a 3-inch barrel, but it also has a lot longer cylinder, which might make up for its lack of barrel or might make the problem worse. So let's go back to the chronograph and see what we find out. So let's see what kind of results we get when we shoot this Winchester PDX-1 ammo through our Taurus Judge. 764. 773. 764. 762. Now let's crunch those numbers and see how they compare. So how'd we do? Well, we got 765 feet per second. Now that's 60 feet per second less than the 825 we were getting out of this. So with this short barrel, it does rob you of a lot of velocity out of your 45 Colt. Now some of these Judges have like a 6-inch barrel, and if that's the one you've got, then your results are probably going to be pretty close to what I got with this. But they advertise the Judge as a concealed carry anti-personnel type firearm, so most of them that people are carrying are this 3-inch barreled model, and some of them even have 2-inch barrels. And when you do that, you are taking a lot of velocity out of your 45 Colt. So the claim that a 45 Colt is just as powerful as a 45 ACP, well, there's some truth to that, but not when you compare this short-barreled Judge with the format that most typically shoots a 45 ACP. In these short-barreled guns, even if you have a 1911 and you're carrying one of those subcompacts, you are losing a lot of velocity. And where that becomes relevant is hollow point bullets are almost entirely based on velocity. The faster you propel them, the more expansion you're going to get, up to a point. And there's a thing called expansion threshold, a certain velocity, and that'll change depending on what gun you have, what type of ammo you're talking about. But you have an expansion threshold, and when your velocity gets below that, your expansion will become minimal down to none. And for guns like this that are barely above expansion threshold to start with, when you start shooting out of this short barrel, have you robbed yourself of so much velocity that you're not going to get enough expansion to talk about? Let's put that to the test. Well, in the time it took to set up for this, the weather went to hell, but that's okay. What we're going to do is to test hollow point expansion. We're going to shoot from 7 yards because the FBI has been telling us for decades that's the mean average distance for a lethal confrontation. We're going to shoot through both our soda jugs and into our high-tech bullet stop, which is just 40 layers of fleece. This time of year I thought it'd be festive to use red and green soda. Now, as a baseline to compare to, we're going to start with the Vaquero and its 5.5-inch barrel, and we'll shoot a few shots and see how those expand. Then we'll repeat the process with the Judge and its 3-inch barrel and compare the results. With a 5.5-inch barrel, that looked pretty effective. Now let's shoot those same rounds out of this 3-inch barrel Judge and see if we're getting the expansion and the effect that we want. Well, here's a close-up of the bullets we fired at those soda jugs. On your left, the ones fired out of the 5.5-inch barrel, and on your right are the ones fired out of the 3-inch barrel Judge. The ones out of the longer barrel are all expanded very well and very consistently. You can see how the bullet is peeled down like a banana on each side, and it expanded a great deal. The ones fired out of the shorter barreled Judge with its lower velocity also expanded very well, but you can see that they're not peeled down as far, and if you could look close at them, you'd see that although they're expanded well, in terms of the diameter that they expanded to, it's not quite as much. Pretty good, but not quite as much. So you did lose just a little bit. So the bullets expanded okay, but how does that translate into real results? Well, you saw the soda jugs explode. You can judge that for yourself. But in the aftermath of that, the one shot with the Judge, you can see there's some breaking here, but not a great deal. As compared to the ones shot with the longer barreled revolver, there's a lot of damage here, and that result seems to be pretty consistent throughout. But the real question is, did the Judge with its lower velocity and shorter barrel drop below expansion threshold? And the answer is absolutely not. The expansion out of these bullets was quite good and very consistent. So even though you could argue that the Judge's barrel is short enough that it really robs you of some performance. You could argue that the level of performance you're getting sure seems to be sufficient, at least with this brand of ammunition. Now let's take our Judge back over to the soda jugs and let's repeat that with a different brand of ammo and see what kind of expansion we can get. Now I've got the Judge loaded with Winchester silver tip ammunition, and this is also a 225 grain jacketed hollow point. So let's see what this does at 7 yards. Well, here's our Winchester silver tips. Now, 2 of the 3 bullets lost their jacket. This one managed to stay together, and you can see how expanded that is. And losing the jacket, is that a good thing or a bad thing? You can be the judge on that. But there's no question, even at the lower velocities this short-barreled gun gives you, 45 Colt ammunition will definitely expand. So shooting 45 Colt ammunition out of your Taurus Judge revolver seems to work out pretty well. We get really good expansion on those hollow points, and it blew up our soda jugs really impressively. However, how does that compare to shooting a more conventional revolver like this Ruger Security 6 357 Magnum, which by the way is a 6-shot revolver, not a 5. And if you compare the entirety of the dimensions of both guns, it's actually a smaller, lighter gun. Let's try this soda jugs into our bullet stop experiment again with the 357 and see how that compares to the 45 Colt. And with the 357, our performance on the jugs seems to be pretty good, arguably better. Well, the sun's out a little bit, that's nice. Now, in part 1 of this presentation, we shot the Taurus Judge with buckshot and demonstrated that at close distances like 7 yards, your pattern was still tight enough that it did not in any meaningful way increase your hit probability. But by contrast, at 25 yards, that pattern had spread out so much that it significantly decreased your hit probability. But people wanted to see, well, what will the Judge do with 45 Colt ammo? Okay, let's shoot at 25 yards, and we'll shoot the Taurus Judge with 45 Colt ammo, and compare that to more conventional revolvers, and see what kind of results we get. And there's our 5 shots out of our Taurus Judge with 45 Colt ammo at 25 yards. Now let's try that again with a more conventional handgun like this Smith & Wesson Model 15 and shoot our other target at 25 yards and see how the results compare. So how'd we do? Well, if you want to put a numerical score on it, with the Judge I got 40 out of 50, and with the Model 15 I got 49 out of 50. Now we're shooting 25 yards. This is plenty of accuracy to do the intended job. But again, a more conventional revolver just does better. Now when I do this demonstration, I've done this demonstration many times, there's always somebody that says, well, Paul, that's not fair, because the Judge is a compact concealed carry gun. It's not a full-size target gun like the Model 15. Really? When you compare these 2 revolvers, the Judge is in fact significantly bigger and heavier than the Model 15. This is by far a more concealable gun. But just to be fair, we'll paste up these shot holes and do this again And we'll do it with a different revolver, like this Ruger SP-101 357 Magnum. Now this is most certainly a concealed carry gun. It's got a shorter barrel than the Judge. It's a 357 Magnum, so it's got a lot more recoil and it's significantly more powerful. Now this SP-101 is a decent gun. However, it has a grip that I do not like, a trigger pull that I really don't care for, and sights that I don't like at all. So, let me shoot this at 25 yards, and we'll see how it compares to this concealed carry gun like the Judge. So how'd we do? Well, I got 45 out of 50 at 25 yards with this gun that I hate. So, although with 45 cold ammo the Taurus Judge is sufficient, other more conventional guns are just a little better. So when you load a Taurus Judge with 45 cold ammunition, it will deliver adequate accuracy. However, the main selling point of the Judge, as far as its role as a concealed carry or personal protection type firearm, is its ability to shoot multiple projectile ammunition. That's where you get your hit probability, is from the multiple projectile rounds that it can shoot. Well, in part one of this, we were able to demonstrate that conventional buckshot at close ranges is too tight a pattern to help, and at long ranges is too big a pattern to help. Well, in pointing that out, a lot of people said that I should try these various different types of ammunitions, and they suggested a whole bunch of things. One of the ammunitions that someone suggested was a 410 shell that would shoot a 410 slug and 2 balls of triple-aught buck. The idea being that the 410 slug would grip the revolver's rifling and shoot accurately like a bullet will, while at the same time the 2 buckshot pellets will spread out and add to your hit probability. While at the same time, because that slug will shoot accurately, it will not detract from your hit probability through pattern entropy at longer ranges. That sounds great. That sounds hypothetically like a great idea. However, the problem with doing that was I went to Bi-Mart, Walmart, a couple of my local gun stores, D&B Supply, Sportsman's Warehouse, and Cabela's, and none of those places had that ammunition in stock. So as good as that idea sounds, it doesn't really help you if you can't actually buy the ammunition that we're talking about. This is why in doing demonstrations like this, I usually use the Federal or the Winchester ammunition that's just 410, 3-inch Magnum, 5 pellets of triple-aught buck, because that's what most likely people will have. That's what's available at the gun store. All that having been said, I was able to find a really cool type of multiple projectile ammunition. It's this Winchester PDX-1 410 ammunition. Now this is a 3-inch Magnum that's loaded with 4 defense disc projectiles and 16 plated BBs. Well, the first thing you got to say is, what is a defense disc projectile? Well, let me cut one of these shells open and we'll take a look at what's in there. So here's your defense disc projectiles, which look kind of like watch batteries, and you've got 16 copper-plated BBs, BB being just a size designation of .177 caliber. Now we've got some big shooting C's on here. So let's take our Winchester PDX-1 Defender ammunition and we'll use our Taurus Judge revolver and we'll go back 7 yards and we'll shoot a couple of shots at our right-hand target and see how it patterns. So how'd we do? Well, the first thing to note is I was aiming at the center, and this impact is off by quite a bit. Remember, that's only 7 yards, so that's off by a lot. So this ammunition does not hit in the same place as the conventional buckshot or 45 cold ammunition does. Secondly, that pattern is still very tight, so it hasn't spread out enough to really increase your hit probability. But what about the BBs? That's a different story. I've got them from the top to the bottom of the target. Hell, one of them even hit the other target.
So in terms of creating a big pattern and increasing your hit probability, those BBs do that very well. But that brings up the question, out of this short-barreled revolver, how effective are those BBs going to be as an anti-personnel projectile? Let's see if we can put that to the test.
One thing I want to stress is that BBs can be a very effective projectile. When they're loaded in a 12-gauge 3-inch Magnum and there's over 80 pellets in each shell, and they're coming out of this 20-inch barreled shotgun. Let me show you what I mean. But how much effect are you actually going to get out of the 3-inch barreled Judge revolver when there's only 16 pellets in each shell? Let's find out. So we'll shoot from 7 yards, and I'll aim for this space in the center, and hopefully our defense disc projectiles will go through this space, and we'll only see what effect we're getting from the peripheral BBs. And there you have it. No, I wouldn't want to be shot with one, but they kind of lose a lot of effect when they're 16 pellets, not 80 plus like out of the 12 gauge, and when they're propelled out of a 3-inch, not a 20-inch barrel.
Well, let's try something else. We'll go back 7 yards and we'll shoot the block on your right with 5 rounds of the Winchester PDX-1 Defender defense disc ammunition. Then we'll reload and shoot the block on your left with 5 rounds of just conventional .45 Colt ammo and see how those compare. So how'd we do? Well, as you can see, the multiple projectile round didn't do any more, arguably less, than your plain old .45 Colt ammunition. But now, let's take a third cinder block and see how either of these compare to our .357 Magnum. So how'd we do? Well, once again, the Taurus Judge seemed to deliver adequate performance, but a more conventional revolver like the .357 just did a little better.
So is there any category where the Taurus Judge can outperform a conventional revolver? Yes, shooting snakes. Now you can see I got the snake targets down there at the bottom of my cardboard. When you try to shoot a snake with a conventional revolver, like your typical 38 or 44 caliber revolver with shot shells in it, it just doesn't work out that well if they're any distance away at all. The Taurus Judge, loaded with 410 shot shells, can do a pretty good job for you. Now that comes with a couple of caveats. One, you have to use the right 410 ammunition. What I've got loaded in right now is Federal 410 3-inch 11/16 ounce of number 7.5 shot. You really want to use a small shot like 7.5, not number 6 or number 4. You won't have enough pellet count. Also, with this 3-inch barrel, if the snake is very far away, like 10 or 12 feet, your pattern is going to spread out too much to get an effective hit. That's okay, because if he's 10 feet away, he's not any kind of threat to you. At this distance here, these are 6 feet away, the Taurus Judge should do pretty well. Now let me see how many pellets I can get in the head of each one of these snakes. Now that looks like pretty good pattern density. Let me go count the shot holes.
So how'd we do? Well, we got 1, 3, and 4. 4 is probably going to be effective, 1 probably not. And you can see out of this short barrel that birdshot can be a little bit inconsistent. But either way, at the distances at which a snake is likely to be a danger to you, this Taurus Judge with birdshot is probably going to be fairly effective.
So trying to shoot a snake 6 feet away with the Taurus Judge with birdshot was marginally effective. How does that compare to a more conventional revolver like this .38 Special? Well, when I tried to shoot the snakes 6 feet away with a .38 birdshot, I had disastrous results. They're terribly ineffective. The most common number of hits I got was 0. So by comparison, the judge did very well. However, we're only trying to shoot 6 feet. So how well would we do if we tried to shoot the snake with just a .38 special hollow point bullet? Let's find out. Let's take a closer look. So how'd we do? Well, the first snake has 2 holes in its head. The second snake has 2 holes in its head. Now, one of those might look like a marginal hit. No, that would have killed the snake. And the third snake has 2 holes in its head. So what that tells us is that if a snake is close enough to be a threat to you, and close enough that that short-barreled judge will be effective against it, then a conventional revolver with conventional ammunition would have killed the snake just as easily. I know that sounds like pretty smug advice while I'm out here shooting paper targets in the snow. And in snow like this, if I saw a snake, I'd call Ripley's. I wouldn't reach for my pistol. But I have shot plenty of snakes in real life, and this is pretty consistent with the results I've gotten. So again, what we've shown is that at this particular task, the Taurus Judge works, but a conventional revolver works just a little better. So finally, after a presentation that's gone on a lot longer than I wanted it to, we're finally coming to the end. And what have we gotten out of everything we've seen and done today? Well, first of all, the adage that a .45 Colt is just as powerful as a .45 ACP, although that has some truth to it, it is not true when you're shooting .45 Colt ammo out of this short-barreled Judge compared to the format that .45 ACP is typically fired in, like a 1911 or a full-size SIG or a full-size Glock. That having been said, when we shot those soda jugs with .45 Colt ammunition, we got actually pretty good performance, and I was really impressed at how much expansion we got out of those hollow point bullets at the relatively low velocity the Judge delivers. But shooting those jugs, the good effect we got out of the .45 Colt, the .357 Magnum out of a conventional revolver just did a little bit better. When we shot the Judge for accuracy at 25 yards, I was actually impressed at the accuracy we got out of a gun like this. The Judge delivers completely adequate accuracy when loaded with .45 Colt ammunition. But again, a more conventional revolver just delivered a little better accuracy. The real thing, though, especially when it comes to accuracy, what sets the Judge apart is its ability to shoot multiple projectile ammunition. And in part 1 of this, I shot the buckshot and we saw the results we saw. Well, today we shot that multiple projectile round with the defense discs and the BBs. Well, as far as enhancing your hit probability, the discs did just like the buckshot did. They retained too tight of a pattern at that distance to really enhance your hit probability. But those BBs, they were all over the place. They gave you a whole lot more hit probability. In terms of something that's going to give you a chance to hit the target, that really increased your chances. But at the same time, when we shot the soda jugs with just the BBs, you saw that the performance they delivered was lackluster at best. So it really wasn't that effective. And again, with that type of ammunition, still wasn't as effective as a more conventional revolver. And when we shot the cinder blocks, well, the multi-projectile rounds against the cinder block, they were effective enough, I guess, but certainly no more so, arguably less so, than with the .45 Colt ammunition out of the Judge, and neither of those was nearly as effective as a more conventional revolver like this .357. And finally, in shooting the snakes, well, the Judge with real live .410 birdshot shells can deliver mediocre to adequate results in that, but still, a conventional revolver with conventional, just regular bullets perform just a little bit better. And the bottom line to the whole thing seems to be that whatever you can do with the Taurus Judge, from the size of it in terms of its ability to be concealed to any kind of performance in anything I've tested, the Judge performs okay, actually better than I expected it to. But still, conventional revolvers like these just do the same job better. And that seems to be the bottom line to the whole thing. So if you're thinking about buying a Judge, I'd suggest you ask yourself some questions along the lines of, what is it that you think this gun can do? What is it that you expect this gun to do? What is it that you think you're going to get out of this gun? And then ask yourself, do you really think that this is going to deliver better performance than something like this or something like this? And that's just revolvers, let alone all the good autoloaders that are out there. And if you ask yourself those questions, you're probably going to come up with the answer that the Judge is not the gun for you. Now, if you're thinking about buying one because you think it's really cool and you think it looks neat, well, yeah, it does. There was somebody that said something about it's fun to just go blast the heck out of stuff. Well, he's right, it is. This is a fun gun in a lot of ways. But if you're thinking about it as a home defense or concealed carry or anti-personnel type gun, I don't think it's going to give you the performance that you think you're going to get. That having been said, the bottom line really to the whole thing is you got to have a gun that you feel safe and you feel confident with. And if the Judge does that for you, if you hear what people call the bump in the night and you pull this out and you feel good about it, that's more important than anything I've shown you here today. So, as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching this really way too long review of the Taurus Judge.